The stars above the battlefield burned with a cold, distant light, but their beauty was lost in the chaos of war. Explosions flashed across the black sky, turning night into day and then back again within moments. The Coalition fleet was in full retreat, their once proud ships fleeing before the relentless advance of the Dominion. The Dominion had come without mercy, striking with precision and overwhelming numbers. Their ships were larger, stronger, and equipped with weapons the Coalition could barely defend against. Every battle ended the same way, with shattered hulls, broken defenses, and the survivors running for their lives. For weeks, the Coalition worlds had sent reinforcements. They fought with discipline, with logic, and with the calm precision their military traditions demanded. But it was not enough. The Dominion was too powerful, too confident, and too experienced in crushing those who resisted them. In the great war chamber of the Coalition Council, the air was heavy with despair. Leaders from dozens of species sat around the glowing holomap, which showed the spreading red of the Dominion's advance. Every day that red pushed farther into Coalition territory, swallowing one world after another. "The outer colonies are lost," said Counselor Vera, her voice tired and broken. She was tall, her scales shining faintly under the lights, but there was no pride left in her posture. "We cannot stop them. We cannot even slow them." Another counselor with silver fur and deep eyes slammed his clawed hand against the table. "Our fleets have followed every tactical calculation. We have done all that logic and reason demand, yet the Dominion breaks us at every turn. What more can be done?" Silence followed his words. Everyone knew the truth, but no one wished to say it. The Dominion believed victory was already theirs, and the Coalition could not deny it. The holomap flickered, and an advisor showed a projection of the war. In 2 months, the Dominion would reach the heart of the Coalition. In 3 months, the Council itself would fall. There was no calculation, no strategy, no simulation that showed hope. At last, it was the elder counselor, Talarin, who spoke. His voice was slow and cracked with age, yet it carried across the chamber. "There is one option left to us." Dozens of eyes turned toward him, some with curiosity, others with exhaustion. "Speak, Elder," said Counselor Vera. Talarin leaned forward, his thin hands resting on the table. "Years ago, during the border skirmishes with the rogue raiders, I encountered a strange being. Not of our Coalition, not of the Dominion, a wanderer from a small isolated world. His kind called themselves humans." The Council stirred. Few had heard the word, and those who had dismissed it as unimportant. Talarin continued. "This human fought beside our soldiers when the raiders attacked. He was untrained by our standards, and his tools were primitive compared to ours. Yet, he achieved what none of our simulations predicted. He turned defeat into victory not through strength, but through something else. Something I could not define. Instinct, perhaps. Or madness. Madness." Counselor Vera's eyes narrowed. "We are losing a war of survival, and you speak of calling upon madness?" Talarin's voice did not waver. "Yes, because logic has failed us. Our perfect calculations lead only to defeat. The Dominion knows how we think. They expect us to follow reason, and so they destroy us at every turn. Perhaps what we need is someone who does not think as we do." The chamber fell silent. The idea was dangerous, absurd even. To place hope in a single being from an unknown species? It was madness, and yet, so was continuing to fight as they were. Finally, Counselor Vera broke the silence. "If this human is as unpredictable as you claim, then perhaps unpredictability is our only chance." Reluctantly, the Council agreed. A message was sent across the stars, a call to a forgotten ally from a forgotten skirmish. The days that followed were the darkest the Coalition had ever known. The Dominion crushed another defensive line. Entire cities burned. Refugees flooded safe worlds, bringing with them tales of unstoppable enemies. In the barracks, soldiers whispered that the war was already lost. The Dominion's commanders mocked the Coalition in intercepted transmissions, declaring that surrender was the only rational path left. And then, one quiet morning, a small ship slipped through the blockade and landed on the central world of the Coalition. It was no grand battleship, no gleaming vessel of power. It was old, patched together from mismatched parts, barely holding together. The guards looked at it with confusion, unsure whether to laugh or to be suspicious. The ship's ramp opened with a hiss, and out stepped a single figure. He was not tall, not armored, not impressive by any alien measure. His clothing was simple, his boots worn, his rifle old and scratched. His face was lined with fatigue, but his eyes carried a sharpness that drew attention. This was the human, Commander Daniel Hayes. The alien generals studied him in silence as he walked into the council chamber. Some expected him to tremble before the weight of the moment, but instead he carried himself with a strange calm. "You are the one they speak of?" Counselor Vera asked, her voice skeptical. "The one who thinks differently?" Hayes gave a small shrug. "That depends on who you ask." The counselors explained the situation to him. They showed him the hollow map, the endless red spreading across their worlds. They spoke of the Dominion's power, their flawless strategies, their overwhelming strength. When they finished, the chamber was silent. Every eye was on the human. Surely now he would see the truth. Surely he would admit there was no hope. But Daniel Hayes only leaned back in his chair, looked at the map, and smiled. "Good," he said softly. "That makes it interesting." The counselors stared at him, stunned. To them, this was the end of all things. To him, it was something else entirely. And for the first time in many weeks, a flicker of curiosity, even hope, stirred in the hearts of the coalition leaders. Perhaps madness was what they needed after all. The council chamber still echoed with the human's strange words. The generals whispered to one another, uneasy. For them, war was numbers, calculations, and precise plans. To hear someone greet overwhelming odds with a smile and call it interesting made no sense. Counselor Vera leaned forward, her sharp eyes fixed on the human. "Commander Hayes," she said, her voice careful, "you have seen the state of this war. You understand that the Dominion grows stronger every day. Do you truly believe there is something we have not tried?" Daniel Hayes glanced at the glowing map again, the red of the Dominion spreading like fire across the galaxy. "Yes," he answered simply. A murmur ran through the chamber. General Corrin, a broad-shouldered warrior with metal plates covering his skin, slammed his fist against the table. "Impossible. We have exhausted every logical path. Every possible strategy has been tested in simulations. The Dominion is too strong. There is no hidden solution you can find with your primitive mind." Hayes tilted his head and smiled faintly. "That's the problem. You keep thinking in straight lines. The Dominion knows your logic. They know how you calculate, so they always know where you'll be. But if you stop following their game—" He leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Then they can't predict you anymore." "Chaos," Talaran whispered, the elder counselor who had first spoken of the human. "You speak of using chaos as a weapon." Hayes nodded. "Sometimes the only way to win against order is to break the rules of the game." The generals exchanged uneasy glances. For their cultures, war was honorable and disciplined. To abandon order felt dangerous, yet none of them could deny that discipline had led them only to defeat. Finally, Vera gave a slow nod. "Very well, human. Show us what you mean. Prove that your chaos can do what our reason has failed to do." That evening, Hayes walked through the Coalition's main military base. Soldiers of many species moved through the halls. Scaled warriors, furred scouts, tall and elegant officers. They all stared at the human as he passed. Some whispered in confusion, others in doubt. A few laughed at the sight of him, small and unimpressive compared to their towering frames. Hayes ignored it. He went to the command center and studied the Dominion's movements. The enemy's next target was clear, the system of Veyron, a world rich in fuel and supplies. The Coalition planned to meet them with one final line of defense. Every simulation predicted defeat. When the generals explained their plan, Hayes shook his head. "No, that's exactly what they expect you to do. They want you to stand in their path so they can crush you in one stroke." General Corrin growled. "And what would you do instead, human?" Hayes tapped the star map with his finger. "You retreat. You let them think they're driving you away. Then you strike them where they don't expect it. Not with strength, but with surprise." The room filled with disbelief. Retreat was dishonor. To give up ground willingly was unthinkable. But Hayes only smiled. "Trust me, the Dominion believes they already know the end of this story. Let's change the ending." The days that followed were filled with strange orders. Hayes reorganized fleets in ways that confused even the commanders giving the commands. He ordered decoy supply runs, small ships carrying fake cargo to lure Dominion scouts into traps. He had soldiers abandon strongholds but leave behind hidden explosives, turning every victory for the Dominion into a costly mistake. At first, the alien officers resisted. "This is madness," they muttered. We waste resources, we abandon ground, we fight without honor. But slowly results began to show. The Dominion's supply lines were ambushed. Their forward fleets were delayed. Every time they thought they had cornered the coalition, the humans' tricks turned the tables. In the barracks, soldiers began to whisper a new kind of story. They spoke of the human who smiled at impossible odds. They spoke of battles where a hopeless defense suddenly became a clever trap. They spoke of how their enemies, once so confident, now hesitated. One young soldier, a reptilian recruit named Syrah, asked her commander, "How does he do it? How does the human see victories where we see only defeat?" Her commander shook his head. "I do not know, but when he stands among us, I feel as if losing is no longer certain." The Dominion commanders noticed the change as well. At first they dismissed it. Primitive desperation, they called it. They believed the coalition's strange new tactics were nothing more than the flailing of a dying enemy. But then, something unexpected happened. A Dominion fleet was ambushed in an asteroid belt, losing half its ships to mines carefully hidden in the rocks. Another fleet found itself trapped between collapsing stargates, unable to escape before coalition forces struck. The Dominion began to grow frustrated. Victory had seemed so certain, so easy. Yet suddenly, every step forward cost more ships, more time, more resources. One Dominion commander sneered at the reports. "The coalition has changed its methods. Someone else is directing them. Someone unpredictable." Back on the coalition homeworld, the council watched the war reports with surprise. For the first time in months, the map did not only show red spreading across their worlds. Now there were patches of resistance, even small victories. Counselor Vera studied the human across the table. "You have done something no simulation predicted. You have brought doubt into the Dominion. Tell me, Commander Hayes, what is it your people possess that gives you this strength?" Hayes leaned back, his eyes distant. "We don't stop when logic says we should. If the odds are against us, we don't surrender. We fight anyway. And sometimes that's enough to change everything." His words were simple, but they carried a weight the council could not deny. The humans' influence grew stronger each day. Soldiers who once feared the Dominion now walked with renewed confidence. Officers who once followed strict calculations now dared to improvise. Hope, long thought dead, began to flicker once again. But the Dominion was not defeated yet. Their fleet still outnumbered the coalition. Their weapons still outmatched anything the Allies could build. And though the humans' tricks had slowed them, the war was far from over. The generals knew this. The council knew this. Even Hayes knew this. But he did not seem afraid. One evening, as he stood on the balcony overlooking the stars, young Syrah approached him. "Commander," she asked, "do you really believe we can win?" Hayes looked at her, then at the endless night sky. A small smile touched his lips. "I believe they think they've already won. And that's their biggest mistake." Syrah tilted her head, confused. "Why?" "Because when you underestimate a human," Hayes said quietly, "you've already lost." The war was far from finished. But something had changed. The Dominion no longer marched with absolute confidence. The coalition no longer waited for certain defeat. And at the center of it all stood one human, carrying nothing but his old rifle, his reckless courage, and his refusal to accept the end. The Dominion had grown used to victory. For years, their fleets had crushed one enemy after another, their commanders believing no power in the galaxy could resist them. Every battle followed the same pattern: overwhelming force, precise strategy, and inevitable surrender. But now, something strange was happening. The Dominion advanced into sectors they believed empty, only to be ambushed by hidden fleets. Supply convoys vanished without trace, destroyed or stolen. Ships chasing retreating coalition vessels suddenly found themselves lured into asteroid fields where mines and hidden cannons waited. The commanders of the Dominion were furious. This was not the war they had expected. It was supposed to be clean, simple, predictable. Instead, the coalition seemed to fight like a creature with 1,000 claws, scratching and striking from every shadow. What they did not know was that behind this chaos stood one human, Daniel Hayes. In the coalition command center, the generals argued as usual. The map before them showed the Dominion's next move, a heavy fleet preparing to strike at a key fuel station. General Corrin pounded the table. "We must gather all our ships to defend it. If we lose that station, our fleets will have no fuel to continue the war." Hayes shook his head slowly. No, that's what they want you to do. They expect you to fight for it. Vera frowned. Are you suggesting we abandon it? Not abandon, Hayes corrected. His finger traced along the map, showing a narrow path of stars. We let them take it. But we turn it into a trap. We load the station with explosives, mines, and false signals. When they believe they've won, we'll make them regret stepping foot inside. The general stared at him in silence. To them, the idea sounded reckless, even insane. To willingly give up a valuable resource went against every lesson they had ever learned. You are asking us to risk too much, said General Corrin, his voice filled with disbelief. What if this fails? Hayes looked at him, his expression calm but firm. If we keep fighting the way you want, we'll lose everything anyway. Sometimes the only path to victory looks like madness. The plan was put into motion. Coalition engineers worked quickly, turning the fuel station into a trap disguised as a treasure. Empty tanks were filled with volatile chemicals. Hallways were lined with hidden charges. Old defense turrets were reprogrammed to activate after a delay. When the Dominion fleet arrived, the station appeared abandoned. They moved in swiftly, laughing at the ease of their victory. Reports were sent to their commanders. The coalition flees again. Their defeat is inevitable. And then the traps began to spring. Explosions rocked the station. Dominion soldiers ran through corridors that collapsed behind them. Ships docked at the station were destroyed when hidden mines ignited. By the time they realized the danger, it was too late. From the shadows of nearby asteroids, coalition ships emerged, striking the panicked Dominion fleet. What was supposed to be a simple victory turned into a costly disaster. The Dominion lost a fleet that day. The coalition lost only a handful of ships. In the barracks that night, soldiers gathered around to speak of the humans' plan. He turned defeat into a weapon, one said in awe. He tricked them into destroying themselves, another whispered. But it was madness, a third muttered, shaking his head. What kind of mind thinks of such things? Syrah, the young recruit, listened quietly. She remembered Hayes' calm words, his strange smile. Maybe madness is exactly what we need, she said softly. The Dominion commanders raged at their defeat. Reports poured in of missing convoys, sudden ambushes, and battles lost to unpredictable tactics. They struggled to find a pattern, but there was none. Every move of the coalition was different, strange, impossible to predict. One commander growled in frustration. This is not the work of the coalition. Someone else is guiding them. They were right, but by the time they realized it, the damage was already done. Meanwhile, in the coalition council chamber, the leaders watched the growing list of victories. They were small victories, yes, but victories nonetheless, something they had not seen in a long time. Counselor Vera turned to Hayes. Your methods are reckless. You risk lives with every plan, and yet we cannot deny they work. Tell us, human, why do you gamble so freely with everything? Hayes leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Because sometimes the gamble is the only path left. You can't win by playing safe when your enemy has every advantage. You have to make them uncomfortable. You have to force them into mistakes. Elder Talaran nodded slowly. It is as I said. He does not think as we do. Where we see certain loss, he sees opportunity. Perhaps it is madness, or perhaps it is simply the way of his people. In the following weeks, the war changed. The Dominion still advanced, but every step forward came with unexpected losses. A fleet would capture a planet only to find its infrastructure useless. A squadron would chase fleeing enemies only to be surrounded by hidden ships. The Dominion's confidence began to weaken. Soldiers whispered of a phantom commander, a mind that turned war into a game of tricks and traps. And within the coalition, something even greater was happening. Hope was returning. Soldiers who once fought without spirit now charged into battle with fire in their eyes. Officers who once feared making mistakes now dared to take risks. They began to copy Hayes' methods, improvising, surprising the enemy. It was as if the human's madness was spreading through them all. One evening, Hayes sat alone, studying the star maps. Syrah approached cautiously. Commander, she asked, do you never fear being wrong? What if your gamble fails? Hayes smiled faintly without looking up. Then we lose. But if we don't try, we lose anyway. I'd rather fight on the edge of madness than die waiting for logic to save me. Syrah considered his words, then nodded. She felt something stir in her chest, a courage she had never known before. The Dominion soon realized they were no longer fighting the same enemy. The coalition had become unpredictable, dangerous. alive with a spirit that could not be crushed by numbers alone. And at the center of it all stood one human, guiding them with strategies no machine could predict, no algorithm could counter. To the Dominion, it seemed like madness. To the Coalition, it was hope. To Daniel Hayes, it was simply war. The Dominion still believed victory was inevitable. Even with the sudden setbacks, their commanders told their soldiers that these were only delays, nothing more. They reminded their fleets of their overwhelming numbers, their stronger weapons, and their long history of conquering every enemy they had faced. But beneath their words, cracks had begun to show. Reports of ambushes filled their command channels. Convoys were attacked in regions they believed secure. Strongholds they captured were turning into deadly traps. For the first time in years, doubt spread through their ranks. The source of this chaos was a single human, Commander Daniel Hayes, and his next plan would be the boldest of all. Inside the Coalition war chamber, the Council gathered around the glowing star map. The Dominion's fleet was pushing toward the heart of Coalition space. Their next target was clear: the fortified system of Karen, home to millions and a key defensive stronghold. General Corrin's voice rumbled with anger. "We cannot lose Karen. It is our shield. If the Dominion takes it, they will have a direct path to our core worlds." Counselor Vera turned to Hayes. "You have guided us this far, human. What do you see?" Hayes studied the map silently. His eyes followed the Dominion's lines of advance, their supply routes, their reinforcements. Finally he spoke. "We don't defend Karen." The room erupted in outrage. "Madness," one general shouted. "You would give them the key to our survival?" Another demanded. "Have you lost all reason?" Hayes waited for the voices to fade before answering. "If we fight for Karen, we will lose. Their fleet is too large. They expect you to defend it, and they're ready for it. But if we let them think they have won, if we draw them deeper..." He pointed to a narrow corridor of space leading into a cluster of unstable systems. "We can trap them where they believe they are safe." Silence followed his words. The idea of abandoning such an important stronghold was unthinkable. Yet the humans' plans, reckless as they seemed, had worked again and again. Finally, Elder Talaran nodded slowly. "Perhaps this is the moment we must gamble everything." Reluctantly, the Council agreed. The plan was set in motion. Coalition forces pretended to resist the Dominion's advance, but their defense was half-hearted, designed to look desperate. Bit by bit they retreated, leaving Karen exposed. The Dominion fleet entered with triumph. Their commanders broadcast victory speeches, declaring that the Coalition's shield had fallen. Soldiers marched through captured cities, confident that the war was nearly over. But all of this was exactly what Hayes wanted. Hidden among the asteroids around Karen, cloaked Coalition ships waited. In the nearby systems, mines and automated turrets were prepared. Entire regions of space had been rigged as traps, all to spring at the right moment. Hayes stood in the command center, his eyes fixed on the displays. "Wait," he ordered as reports came in of the Dominion's occupation. "Not yet." General Corrin gritted his teeth. "They are celebrating on our worlds, human. How much longer will you wait?" "Until they believe it," Hayes replied calmly. "Until they are certain they have won. That is when we strike." Hours passed. Dominion fleets relaxed their formations. Supply ships arrived, believing the region secure. Their soldiers spread out, careless in their confidence, and then Hayes gave the order. Now. The stars exploded with light. From the asteroid fields, hidden ships uncloaked and opened fire. Mines detonated along the Dominion's supply lines, cutting off their reinforcements. The abandoned stations they had claimed turned into weapons, releasing bursts of plasma that tore through their fleets. Confusion spread among the Dominion ranks. Their commanders shouted orders, but their formations collapsed under the sudden chaos. They had been certain the Coalition was defeated. Now they were surrounded, attacked from every side. Coalition forces surged forward with a ferocity born of desperation and hope. For the first time, the Dominion found themselves not crushing an enemy, but being crushed. In the middle of the battle, Hayes moved from station to station, his calm voice guiding the commanders. "Push here. Fall back there. Let them think they're escaping, then cut them off." His orders were not like the Coalition's usual strict strategies. They shifted constantly, adapting to every moment, turning mistakes into opportunities. To the alien officers, it felt like fighting on the edge of madness, but it worked. Dominion fleets fell one after another. What was supposed to be their greatest victory turned into their worst defeat. News spread quickly. Across the galaxy, whispers grew. The Dominion can bleed. For the first time in generations, their aura of invincibility was broken. In the Coalition barracks, soldiers cheered when they heard of the victory. Some cried, others laughed, but all of them felt the same thing: hope. Sira, the young soldier, told her friends, "The humans said they thought they had already won." He turned that pride against them. He made their victory into their defeat. Back in the council chamber, the leaders gathered to review the results. The Dominion had lost an entire fleet, along with their control of Karen. It was the first major turning point in the war. Counselor Vera looked at Hayes with something like respect in her eyes. "You have done what none of us thought possible. You have given us victory." Hayes shook his head. "Not victory, not yet. They are wounded, not destroyed, and they will come back angrier than before." Elder Talaran studied him closely. "And what will you do then, human?" Hayes's expression was calm, but his eyes burned with determination. "The same thing I've always done. Fight, no matter the odds." Far away in the Dominion command halls, the news of the defeat spread like wildfire. Their supreme leaders raged at the reports. The coalition had been weak, predictable, doomed. How could they have turned the battle? One commander spoke in a hushed voice. "It is the human. Our scouts confirm his presence among them. He is the one leading these strange tactics." The supreme leader's eyes narrowed. "Then it is the human who must be destroyed. Find him, end him. Only then will victory be ours again." But even as they spoke, doubt lingered in their hearts. They had seen how one human could turn the tide of a war. What if there were more? On the coalition homeworld, Hayes walked through the city streets after the victory. Refugees smiled at him. Soldiers saluted. Children pointed and whispered about the strange human who brought hope. He accepted none of it with pride. He knew the war was far from over. The Dominion would return stronger and more determined. But now the coalition had seen something they had forgotten. Victory was possible. Hayes looked at the stars and whispered to himself. They thought it was already over. But it's only just beginning. And so the tide of war had turned. The galaxy had never seen a human before, and now it would never forget one. After the coalition's stunning victory at Karen, the Dominion's confidence was broken. Their fleets had been shattered, their supply lines destroyed, and their soldiers confused and frightened. For the first time in decades, the Dominion realized that victory was not guaranteed. Daniel Hayes, the human who had guided the coalition through chaos, stood at the command center overlooking the starfield. Ships of every species moved in precise patterns, but their strategies were no longer rigid. Soldiers followed his orders, yes, but they also acted on instinct, improvising, adapting. Hayes had changed them. Counselor Vera approached, her long robes brushing the floor. "Commander Hayes," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and awe. "Your plans have turned the tide of this war. The Dominion is reeling. How much longer do you think it will take to finish them?" Hayes shook his head. "I don't know. They are wounded, yes, but they will come back stronger. They will adapt and they will try to destroy us. But we are ready," Vera said. "Because of you." Hayes smiled faintly. "Not just me. Because we fight differently now. You've learned to improvise, to take risks, to see opportunity where logic sees only danger." She nodded slowly. "Then it seems the galaxy may finally understand humans." Hayes looked out at the stars, thinking of all the battles yet to come. The Dominion was not gone. There were still fleets to defeat, planets to protect, and lives at stake. But something had changed irreversibly. The Dominion's return came faster than anyone expected. Weeks after Karen, their fleets regrouped and advanced into the coalition's outer systems. They believed that their enemy's confidence was fragile, that the coalition's victory at Karen had been a fluke. But Hayes was ready. Every trap laid, every ambush planned, every unexpected strike came into play. The Dominion advanced into regions they believed were safe, only to encounter fleets emerging from behind asteroids, hidden mines exploding along their paths, and false supply convoys leading them into deadly ambushes. One Dominion commander shouted into the comms, frustration breaking through his usual cold demeanor. "They fight like animals. How can a single human lead them? How can they anticipate every move?" Hayes, watching the battle unfold on the display, only shrugged. "They're not anticipating every move," he said softly. "They're learning to fight differently, And that is the real advantage. Throughout the coalition forces, Hayes' influence had spread. Soldiers no longer waited for precise orders. Officers adapted to the situation, acting boldly when opportunities arose. Units that once would have panicked under pressure now charged into battle with confidence. A small squad led by Syrah moved through an asteroid field, cutting off a Dominion retreat. She followed Hayes' teachings, improvising when her sensors failed, taking risks she would once have avoided. When she sent word of the squad's success, Hayes only smiled. Exactly. You don't need me to win every fight. You just need to know what to do when the moment comes. It was a lesson that traveled faster than any fleet. One human could inspire an entire coalition of species to fight as if they were one mind, one force. The Dominion, meanwhile, was losing cohesion. Their commanders had expected to face a predictable enemy, but each battle cost them more ships and soldiers. Each plan they laid was countered in ways they could not anticipate. Their confidence, the thing that had carried them to victory after victory, was crumbling. On a command bridge, one Dominion leader whispered almost to himself, "This is not an army. This is madness." He was right, but to the human it was not madness. It was strategy. It was courage. It was determination. It was the refusal to give up, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. Finally, the coalition launched a decisive strike at the Dominion's central fleet. Hayes coordinated attacks across multiple fronts, each unit acting with independence but guided by his overarching plan. Ships emerged from hidden positions, cutting supply lines. Mines detonated along escape routes. Traps sprung in space stations the Dominion thought were under their control. The battle was fierce, but Hayes' tactics worked perfectly. Dominion ships were destroyed, captured, or forced to retreat. The coalition had achieved what no one thought possible. They had turned a hopeless war into a decisive victory. The Dominion's remaining leaders, humbled and shaken, began to retreat to the far edges of known space. For the first time, they feared the human they had once dismissed as insignificant. In the aftermath, the coalition celebrated, but Hayes did not. He walked among the soldiers, offering quiet encouragement rather than praise. Syrah ran up to him, her face lit with excitement. "Commander, we did it!" "They're retreating." Hayes nodded, his expression calm but proud. "Yes, but remember, the war isn't over. They'll return, and next time it may be worse. But you've learned something more important than victory. You've learned how to fight even when the odds seem impossible." She smiled. "We've learned from you." Hayes shook his head. "No, you've learned from yourselves. I just showed you the way." The leaders of the coalition gathered once more, this time to honor the human who had changed the course of history. Counselor Vera spoke first. "Commander Hayes, you have done what none of us believed possible. You have reminded us that the strength of a species is not measured only in technology or numbers, but in courage and adaptability and in the refusal to give up." Elder Tallerin added, "Your people are mysterious, human. Yet today we see why you are dangerous, why you are remarkable. You fight not just with weapons, but with spirit." Hayes stood quietly, letting them speak. He had no desire for titles or accolades. He had fought to protect lives, not to be remembered, but the galaxy would remember. News of the human who led the coalition spread quickly. Across star systems, tales were told of the being who turned hopeless battles into victories, who inspired alien species to fight with courage and ingenuity. The Dominion, once invincible, had learned a lesson they would never forget. Never underestimate a human. On many worlds, children played at imitating the human, building toy ships, drawing maps of space battles, and pretending to lead armies of their own. Soldiers spoke of him in reverent tones. Historians wrote of his tactics and his courage. And in every story the lesson was the same. It is not the strongest weapon, nor the largest army, but the spirit that refuses to surrender that truly defines victory. Hayes looked out at the stars one last time before preparing to depart for the next mission. The galaxy was still dangerous. The Dominion would recover and new threats would arise. But he had given the coalition something more valuable than any victory: hope. As he boarded his small transport ship, he turned back to the council one final time. "Remember this," he said. "They believed victory was theirs, but it was never theirs. Not while humans still fight," and with that, he disappeared into the endless expanse of stars. leaving behind a galaxy forever changed by the courage of one human who dared to challenge the impossible. The legend of Daniel Hayes, the human who could turn despair into hope, who could turn the tide of war through daring, ingenuity and spirit, would live on for generations. Every soldier, every citizen, every future leader would remember the lesson he had taught. The heart of a fighter cannot be measured by size, strength, or technology. It is measured by courage, by ingenuity, and by the refusal to surrender. And somewhere, far beyond the reaches of the known galaxy, the human looked forward to the next challenge, smiling as he thought, no matter the odds, there is always a way to fight, to inspire, and to win.